you guys, are you ready to go here? I'm going to help you guys understand this a little bit better, because when you do double and triple science credentials, it gets a little bit complicated for people. But here's the thing that we do, and typically I would never be in a situation like this talking to you. We work so far behind the scenes, working for government, working for trades, working for industry, working for medicine. Imagine this for me. I'm an interventional journeyman electrician. And what that is that we had to meet and exceed the government standards to be an electrician. We are the only credentialed professionals in the country that are supposed to install and work on Fortis products. So when I talk to you, and here's an example that you hear this, Fortis said, called what I do is a theory. They said, do you theoretically produce electricity? You know, it was just outrageous. Now, I did a separate education in building engineering technology. I spent 3 years at NATE. The reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to see how buildings worked, how they were using energy. As an electrical professional, electron flow, magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields. You know, electricians are a lot smarter than they look, and we do not always have the same educations. My background is not in residential. As a matter of fact, I do this very humbly. I saw my brother-in-law walking through a site one time with a piece of pipe. And I said, you're a journeyman electrician. I said, you're carrying a 2-pound piece of pipe. And he said, yes. And I said, that's what I want to do. So what I did is I went to a guy that was looking for a 3rd or 4th year apprentice, and he said, what are you here for? And he said, I want a job. And he said, do you know how to wire anything? And I said, I can't wire my car stereo. And he said, after we talked a little bit, I said, listen, I'm hardworking. I'll work like heck for you. And then guess what my first job was? This was oil field. So you know that little piece of pipe? I ended up working with this 4-inch rigid, these thousands of pounds of stuff, where they said, look at that big moose. You know, he can move a lot of stuff. So here we worked. I worked oil field, explosion proof, construction at these levels where we try to avoid sparks or arcs. In a refinery, we want to actually contain an explosion to the equipment. So the equipment will actually take that as opposed to blowing up the refineries. We have these classed areas. So everything we do is technical. So when you hear me talk, everything can be qualified. I don't want to be over technical with a lot of people. Now, to top this off, here, imagine for me, you're going to see my background being a thermal radiation consultant. Now, what that is the world is born to temperature, including my electrical background, my building engineering background. We use calculators with the greatest of accuracy. Everybody knows this. We couldn't see temperature. 1979, working for this oil field company, we literally went door to door. We would pull up at a refinery, pull up at a gas plant. It took 2 guys to dress, and we use infrared gear and go and say, we can isolate connection problems for you. We can see electrical problems. And they said, prove it. We would go in, isolate it. That's how our job started. Now, important for me is this. We're not super electricians. Nobody rides a cape. Nobody does anything. We work with teams. We report to an authority. That's as simple as it is. So even as we progressed this, it was amazing on our end here that Syncrude, Suncor, Esso Resources, Shell, Dow Chemical, Sherritt Gordon, underground, above ground, we got so good at this and so accurate working with their electricians, their professionals, that they would actually schedule their shutdowns based on our reporting. They've actually done that here locally. Now the thing for me too, imagine this, I'm probably the first electrician in the world that I lecture medical education. You can imagine with this, the medical education administrator said, you need to put something on your credentials. And I said, I got enough going on. And she said, you're an adjunct professor for medical education. I said, get the heck out of here. So then the next day I'm working with electricians, and I said, did you guys know I'm an adjunct professor? And they said, you're teaching electricity, you're teaching magnetism, electromagnetism, energy issues, toxicity, climate change, why they want to do things like this. Very technical, and we've been doing this for 8 years now. And something else we do is temperature specialists. When we started doing this with medical education, they contacted us and said, how did you see cancer? I said, rapid cell division produces heat. How do you see inflammation? I said, it's elevated temperature. They said, you took it to a source. I said, heat has a source. Temperature has a source. And then my trick for questions was this. Please tell me that you can see inflammation. And the doctor said, no. And I said, so you're blind? And they said, yes. And I said, that's horrible. And they said, you're mad at us. And I said, do you know how long I live as a blind electrician? You know, you're just not going to live. So again, I ended up working with these amazing health professionals where I've actually lectured in 7 countries now. And when I would lecture, they would have people there and I would say, listen, anybody want to dispute this, bring it on, bring on the challenges. So we actually were called into Florida. Here was every difficult diagnosis. And I said, what is this? Are you having a party? And he said, no. He said, we're setting you up for failure. And I said, good. This is non-invasive radiology. When we finished, he said, you didn't overtalk your expertise. You didn't try to diagnose. You isolated problems where the patients literally said, look at that, doc. I told you I wasn't crazy. Now, the reason we do this is this, to provide medicine with sight so they can get the job done. Saves money. Everything is about saving money. So when you see this presentation, we're looking forward to any questions, but understand that responsibility that goes with my job, or even imagine this after 9/11. We ended up getting cleared on a national security issue. And you can imagine this, to be cleared by the defense minister to talk about something our military missed. It's just an incredible responsibility that goes with my job. And tradesmen, mechanical people know these things, it's just the way it is. So I'm going to do a presentation here. Some of the stuff might sound a little aggressive as an electrical professional. When we say, don't touch that. You don't touch that because guess what? You will get your arms and legs blown off your body. You don't play with electricity. You listen to the other trades. You have to do this. So when you guys here's the important part for you, and I say this with all the required humility. We reported this and this information to our authority-having jurisdiction, and they didn't pay attention. Our job after that is to still step forward. As electricians, we don't do something and somebody says, Curtis, it's an inconvenience. Can you not report this explosion? That doesn't happen. Trades don't overtalk each other. We do our jobs, other people do their jobs. So when I show you this, some of it's going to be shocking. You haven't seen it before. You're going to hear things that just shock the heck out of me when I had to intervene in a meter installation here. Okay? So here's when I want to show you this. And some of this stuff might seem a little Star Trek-y, but people have to just understand this. We'll answer all questions. Here's where we work. Globally. We share one atmosphere. We might have borders. We share the water. We live on this planet together. It's that simple. Everything in existence is atoms and molecules. Electrical, energy, everything in existence. So here's a slide we start with for all reasons because we want to not heat the atmosphere. When they talk about climate change, you're going to look at some of this stuff. Here's what Forrest is trying to address. Listen, we're heating the atmosphere. Make no mistake about it. And these guys say it's got to be those emissions. We've got to get this stuff in a hurry. We've got to address this. But this is what happens when you get a bunch of professionals that should be overstepping their boundaries and doing what they've done. And again, we say this, they're going to have to account for what they've done. So here's the first slide here with the work that we do. I'll just show you, give you an example of this. Here's what a connection problem looks like. Syncrude, Suncorp, but this is actually here in Kelowna. You got a temperature scale to the right of this. Here's our visible spectrum right here. This is a disconnect and a motor control center. And you can see this connection right here is hot. So what we would do for the lumber mill here, we isolate this. Their professionals would go, verify it, fix it. But you can see that connection there. It's 49 degrees Celsius here. It's 193 degrees Celsius on the other side. So that means this. You're going to fail. The connection will fail. If they put more power in that connection, it's going to fail. It's an electrical reality, and here's what's important with your meter bases. Fortis and everybody maintains their electrical connections because connections are the weakest part of an electrical circuit. It's that simple. And here's an example of when they address it, and here's how they fix it. You can see right here, here's a hot spot right here in a connection issue. This is actually local as well. This is, what is it? 35 minutes later, you can see that it's gone. Tightening and cleaning the connections have to be done. Loose and corroded connections are a problem, and we're going to talk about that in the meter basement. This is how simple it is. People say, we don't know if EMFs can cause problems. We don't think it causes problems. Well, that's not an electrical reality. And for everybody here, when they say, and again, it's a sad thing that industry has said, we think this is safe. Single power lines are dangerous. And the reason they're dangerous is this. Wires together in a wall, as an example, the EMFs cancel each other out. When you've got single conductors, here's an example of what happened here, in this area here. We had a lineman working on a dead line. That line is 70 feet away from a live line, and they're running parallel. Imagine this guy, he's on this dead line. The single line that was live, the load was so big that it electromagnetically induced the dead line 7 stories away. He made a mistake and grounded himself out and it killed him immediately. And so this is why you don't want to play with electricity. And you can talk to utility guys and they'll say there are times when we put electricians in an electrical circuit, but if you make a mistake and ground yourself out, that's some nasty stuff. So here it is right here. This is Fortis's generator. This is Fortis's area right here. This is their energy. This is in a lumber mill. And you can see this. Here are these single lines right here. Right there, coming through here. And they're parallel conductors because if you ran single wires, they'd just be so big we can't even wrestle them in place. So as soon as we looked at this, I said, I want you to open at the top of the cabinet. And he said, there's no switches in there. And I said, did you put an insulating board on the top of that cabinet? And he said, what if I didn't? And I said, your EMFs are going to interact with the top of that cabinet. You're going to induce currents. You're going to cause problems. And that will explode. They will fail. You'll get a ground fault. It will kill people. It would blow up this place down here for real. And imagine this during construction. That's a $100 problem originally. But somebody didn't understand what they were doing, so they didn't do it properly. So that right there, they have to go through a lot of work to end up putting that microboard right in here because it's going to fail right here. These conductors right here are insulated for 90 degrees Celsius, and that is 86. Now here, how many people were here in 2003? How many people were here for that fire? You imagine this for me, very humbling with my job. We trained our first fire department 25 years ago. And the city of Edmonton actually contacted me and said, listen, we're going to hire you, we want to hire you, you're going to work with our battalion chiefs, and they already hate you. And I said, well, that's our specialty. So we went in there, and here are these fire chiefs, here are these battalion chiefs that said, you're going to show us how to see through the smoke. You're going to show us how to get in there quicker, minimize damage, minimize environmental issues, see people, see pets, put it up quicker, see what's burning, what temperature. But the whole purpose is give them sight. When the fire started in Kelowna in 2003, we were here locally working on climate change issues, and we heard there was a lightning strike in Peachland. And the media was saying, Forster said we can't see it. It's already causing problems. I contacted them and said, listen, do you want to see through the smoke? Do you want to track the direction of the fire through the smoke? They thought I was smoking something. And they said that can't be done. Now here's a humbling thing. We weren't looking for anything. We said, you need a hand with this. And so they said, Curtis, we use infrared gear. We use this. Not everybody uses infrared the same, and here's why. We use the most advanced temperature applications in the world without exception. My background with infrared is 35 years. So it's been a very long time with this. So you can imagine this, and my job being bigger than me, we contacted forestry. We contacted the premier. We said, let us help, let us help. We don't want anything. You can't see this. As soon as it got within Kelowna's jurisdiction, we contacted the city, and they said, Curtis, it isn't across the property line yet. Curtis, now we're in disputes because forestry said we're taking over. So they got into jurisdictional issues where they shut down Kelowna. So they said, Curtis, there's nothing we can do. Forestry's taking over. August 21st. So we're just mapping this forest fire from Peachland to here through the smoke. So August 21st, they're saying, listen, it's close to Kelowna. We've been providing images of doing those things. We're touring Kettle Valley like this. And as soon as we're in Kettle Valley, there's citizens there, there's grandparents, the helicopters landed and everything else. And it got to a point where, listen, I just jumped out in front of a police car and I said, you got to get them out of here. It's here. And here's what they said. Here's forestry reporting, we can't see anything. Here's Kelowna saying, we can't see anything. Here's what we saw. See the smoke here? Here's Kettle Valley. See that right there coming at Kettle Valley? That was moving 300 feet per minute with that big fire. And imagine this for me, for real. The policeman said, listen, you got to volunteer, go down to the fire department, do whatever, whatever. This initiated the evacuation of 15,000 people in Kettle Valley. And they said, you never talked about this? And I said, our job is to work with people. We don't do anything else with this. But you can imagine this, the next day, there we were on Gyro Beach, and August 22nd, guess what? Took out the rest of the houses. We're on the beach imaging the fire from miles away through the smoke, and the Premier comes down, Gordon Cameron. He and his entourage, they looked through the equipment, they said, are we using it? And they said, no, you're not answering calls. And here's where it gets ugly for this, but it is what it is. When they had a public fire inquiry here, Sharon Shepherd was not popular because they said, we don't want that public fire inquiry. So I presented the public fire inquiry. And we had to report to the Premier's office and say why we wanted to be in the public fire inquiry. I said, isn't that a conflict for you guys? And here's the reality of what happened. I presented and showed this information. You're reporting blindness, here's what it looks like. Imagine this, and I ran into a lawyer at the courthouse and he said, you were edited under the public fire inquiry. I said, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean, they edited what up? He said, you didn't present. So I phoned the Premier's office and I said, what did you do? And imagine this for real. And guess what? You don't have any disclaimers with me. If you're a professional weenie, that's your problem. Gordon Campbell's going to have to be responsible for this, for what they did. But his office actually said this to me. Curtis, this public fire inquiry we weren't accepting pictures. It was based on audio only. And when you were talking, oops, the mic came unplugged. So we just decided to delete you from the process. Now that might seem like a good idea for the Premier. Here's the reality of this. 25% of Slave Lake burned because those guys couldn't see that fire coming. I got calls out of Arizona. You hear about those 19 boys that died? 19 firefighters died. And for me to get calls saying, could you have seen that? Yes. Could you have given those guys sight of those guys on the ground? The answer is yes. So here's this edited process. They might think it's a good idea politically, you don't do it. So you can imagine with our work, and me being a real dummy with most parts. People said, we want you to take a look at groundwater. I said, what's groundwater? And they said, these are natural upwellings within river systems. I said, what's the importance? They said, this is where fish spawn. And I said, you guys can't see it. And they said, no. I said, is there a temperature differential? And they said, yes. And then we got into this thing where they said, we tried to do this and failed. And I said, solar EMFs. You always have to watch out for solar EMFs. Solar EMFs heated up the area so quick that they lost their signature. So they challenged us over here and said, listen, we want you to fly a river and show us what you can do. And here again from me, listen, I was a little fatter. I'm still older, I'm hurt, and we had to do this application. Here we are in a ready room like this, and I said, oh crap. And the pilot said, what? And I said, I'm going to have to ride outside the helicopter. So he said, well, we'll tie you in with a cargo harness. If you fall off, just avoid the skid when we get close to the ground. And you can imagine this for real. Here I am, listen, I'm up there in those years, you're doing those things. Even my own group said, I said, listen, I got to step up. So here we flew this river system. I'm on the skid, hanging on the back of the pilot's seat. They've got me tied in with a cargo harness. And here's what we're looking at. Here's groundwater, right here. It's warmer in the wintertime and colder in the summer. Now I know why I've never caught a salmon, because I'm a real poor fisherman. But here's what it looks like, and the purpose of this is this: to give biologists, hydrologists, and everybody the ability to see this, so they can just do their job better for all of us. We don't keep this from anybody. Here's this with medicine. When I said, tell me you can't see inflammation, and they said, no, we can't see inflammation. Well, guess what? Elevated temperature really isn't rocket science to technical people. If you get technical guys, they'll say, listen, it's really quite simple. But again, the imaging application exceeded their expertise. So here again, we did this in the best interest of medicine, governments, insurers. So when you go for a diagnosis, you don't have this blind doctor who's given 15 minutes to look at you and say, we don't know what's going on, but here's what we're going to do for you. This guy here has got rheumatoid arthritis. You see the inflammation around the knees? And again, you've got a temperature scale always on an infrared image. If you want, you can see that hottest is whiter. Here's the inflammation wrapping around his knees with rheumatoid arthritis. Now, when I did this for medicine, they said, you're doing this to flow, that's accountable. And I said, yes. If you can see this, you should be able to fix it. That's what we have to do. You should do it. So here it is. Imagine insurance fraud costs billions of dollars. It costs companies a lot of money. Everybody goes, oh. And the lawyer goes, hey, they can't see this. So we can get you a few $1,000s to do those things. I've been called locally and said, we're going to court with a chronic pain case. What could you do? And I said, do you want me to image the patient in front of both medical teams, both legal teams in front of the judge? And they said, no, we don't want to talk to you right now. Here's a woman who was being denied an insurance claim. And so she said, Curtis, I got my wrist. They're saying they can't see it or do those things. And again, it's just, we don't turn it into rocket science. The importance of this is, it's non-invasive radiology. You're not using an x-ray. Her wrist right here, you can see this right here. This is where she broke her wrist. And you can see the difference in the temperature of her hands. We're expecting symmetry. So here's an example for Ross and other professionals, medical professionals. When you can see this, you should be able to get her done. Now here is a real kicker for this, because doctors pulled over to the side of the road on this and they said, how did you do that imaging on this one here? Because this guy's got Crohn's disease. So imagine this. Here's inflammation. When they talk about irritable bowel, with injury or infection, there's an inflammatory response 100% of the time. Here's irritable bowel right here. When we imaged acute pancreatitis, I was actually in Chicago, and they asked us to look at a boy's shoulder. He had surgery. As soon as I looked at his shoulder, I said, what's up with your abdomen? And he said, nothing. His mother's eyeball went pretty close, and I said, what's up? What's that? And he said, nothing. And his mother was looking nervous, so I took an image anyways. Then the doctors called me and they said, how do you see acute pancreatitis with a technology that sees surface temperature? I said, where's the pancreas? They said, behind the stomach. And I said, imagine this, the pancreas is inflamed. What does heat do? Transfers to the surface of the skin. So we just showed them this inverted banana here. Again, Michelangelo, how many people remember him? Bonanza, all of those things. Guess what? He died from pancreatic cancer. Astronaut Sally Ride died from pancreatic cancer. Lots of people have it. Again, the purpose of this is to give medicine the ability to see it.
So you're like the real-life Daredevil, right? Daredevil can see through, he was blind, so
you can imagine this with, you can imagine this with my parents, you know, and being logical. My mother said, you know, he's going to get himself killed. What are we going to do? And my father said, obviously we'll have to identify him. And they don't want to hear that, but I'm telling you what, I grew up with my parents crazy. I can't imagine. That's why if anybody has kids, you know, forgive them. Because when people said to me, my mother said to me, she said, we'd like you to get married and have children. And honest to goodness, they said this, what if they're like me? I said, oh boy, you know, I just want to remove his parts until he's old enough to understand what the heck they're for. But here's another one here. And again, here's how anal tradesmen are on this. This is a bug bite by a brown recluse spider. Now typically what happens is your hand rots off. And guess whose hand that is? Mine. So I was going down to Texas. I got bit by a bug in the plane. And as soon as I get down there, my hand is swollen. So I'm meeting this guy down there that's he's in a pharmaceutical business, doing these types of things. I'm talking to him, and he keeps eyeballing my hand. And he said, Curtis, your hand's swollen up quite a bit. And I said, I'll be back in Canada tomorrow. I said, I'll go see a doctor. He said, I'm worried about you losing your hand. And I said, what? I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. He said, you want to see what happens with this? So here I am like a good tradesman. I'm using my other hand. And they said, what are you doing? I said, I have to get images of this. Now the importance of this is this, and for Ross. Here's the original bug bite right here. Here's progression of infection in 24 hours. Same span of temperature, and the whole purpose is medical professionals can see effective treatment. You can see progression of infection. And guess what? Here's where modern medicine, alternative products, guess what? I actually had doctors come up to me and they said, show us your hand. Did it break open? I said, no. They said, what did you do? So we went through this regimen of using naturopaths, natural technologies instead of, they said, Curtis, we want to give you steroids, and that's it. I said, what the heck is that going to do? So it's just, again, getting it done. And again, here's this very important work done for the benefit of everybody. And we're very humble with this part of it. Now again, here's the important part. See this inflammation in the ankle? This is where we lectured magnetism, where doctors said, magnetism doesn't work. And I said, do you know what EMFs are? And they said, yes. And I said, do you know the sun and light is EMFs? And they said, yes. I said, what happens if you take the magnetism out of EMFs? And they said, there's nothing. I said, that would be correct. There's nothing. Magnetism is that significant. We know our planet, the Earth's magnetic field. If this stops, everything on the planet dies without exception. That would be the end of it. So when we started applying, I actually got invited into an investigation, and again, here's where I wasn't nice about it. We're doing a building inspection when this was done. And so a guy came to the door and said, ma'am, I've got those things to put on your feet, and they're going to help your inflammation go away. And I just looked the other way, and I thought, what a pile of poop, quite frankly. And then she said, would you be able to see it? And I said, yes. And she said, for real? And I said, yes. She said, would you do that? And I said, on one condition. I'm not going to tell you, and I'm not going to tell him. I said, because it is that significant, depending how they design the field. All magnetism is not created equal, no matter what. So when I did this, these are over the same span, well, I couldn't even do them over the same span of temperature. You see how cold the toes are? You see the inflammation here? This is after 4 hours. Can you see the inflammation? No. See the cold toes? No. Imagine increasing circulation naturally. And this is where this trip started for us at Medicine, actually addressing some of this. And again, this is using magnetism. People hear about breast cancer imaging, okay? And here's the difference between us and others when I talk about this. And again, we don't do this to brag, it's just a real reality. This young woman here, her mother died from breast cancer. Her sister had a breast removed, and she got breast imaging done, and she said, Curtis, this is a 50-clinic international group. They're doctors, and they did my report. She said, would you look at it? I said, I need to look at it. As soon as I looked at it, I said, I disagree with everything that they've put in there. And I said, these doctors, with great intent, I said, it takes more than just what they're doing to do this. So I said, I want you to tell them to adjust the image, lower the span of temperature, because they said this to her. You're relatively symmetrical. So we're going to use this as a baseline. Now you girls imagine this when you're out there getting this done, because mammograms, listen, they're blasting an x-ray through your breasts. It's something you want to avoid, but here's what the tweaked image looks like. Can you see the difference in the breasts over here? And as soon as I did this, I said, what's going on above that left areola? And that's where they removed a cancerous mass. And again, the purpose of this is to isolate that. We don't do this for any reason in the world. We're not looking for anything. So when I talk to you about forests and these types of things, listen, it's just what it is. When we talk about energy issues, forests, we have energy problems. We have all the codes in place. We have everything in place, but even guys like me, we'd wire a building, we'd build a building, and we'd go look at it. How's it look? It's beautiful. We couldn't see it. So how many people have cold spots in their house sometimes? Guess what? This is missing insulation. And the purpose of that is this. Tradesmen seeing this, when you're getting your building inspected, your tradesman can see that, measure it out, fix it, it's done. It's done quickly, the building's more efficient, less energy use, and guess what? It just creates work. Here's a building in Kelowna, and you imagine this, and again with the energy issues and the energy waste that Fortis is doing this. How many people have seen this two-tiered system? When you know what the two-tiered system is, they're billing you for the massive, massive waste. The massive, massive waste that they're not addressing. Because you imagine this is you have your tradesman. Now everybody knows the basics of this. Anybody ever been in a hot air balloon? Anybody ever been in a cold air balloon? Well, because guess what? Cold air falls. Cold air is heavier. Hot air rises. So we looked at this building here, and again, this is in Kelowna. We did this with the city of Kelowna, and these guys just got a little bit defensive instead of this. Here's a tilt-up piece of construction, which means this. You got a concrete slab, we tilt this up, it's quicker. You just do the building like this, and guess what? This building on Enterprise Way, they only insulated the showroom. And imagine this, the heaters are on the roof. The thermostat is 5 feet off the floor. So they said, Chris, what's going on? I said, those heaters are working overtime. You're trying to heat the building from the top down. And that's not how energy works. A massive waste. You can actually tie this into code rules. So dealing with the city of Kelowna, when they saw this, you know the best I got into them? Curtis, you make our management feel defensive. Instead of show this to your trades, get them to do the jobs properly, heating should be in the floor, heat rises. You need to pay your tradesmen properly. These guys know what to do, engineers know what to do. And imagine this, more energy, more emissions, more toxins, more health issues, falls into our watersheds where it affects everybody, mercury, we don't want to do this. And again, forests, you imagine this, if you had heat in the floor, right there, you'd stop all that energy waste, and forests would knock that off the grid immediately. Not even worry about it. Never mind, when you look at this, and here's an example. Is your smart meter going to catch that? It's not even going to see it. These guys are just billing you for the waste while they irradiate you. Now here's an area of Kelowna, you can see the lake in the background. Building code does this. Regional climatic data is passed on from the federal government all the way down to Environment Canada. Now people wouldn't understand this the way things are done today, but how many people like to ride an elevator that doesn't say good luck? Or a plane, and you go on a plane, and instead of having an insurance company, you've got Vegas odds makers. Will you make it? We want things designed. You want an elevator designed for 1,000 pounds to carry at least 1,000 pounds. What happens if you put 2,000 pounds on a 1,000 pound elevator like this? Guess what? I'm not taking that ride. I'd video it, but I'm not going to get on it. And here's the importance. Buildings locally are designed with temperature. Minus 20 Celsius to simulate the coldest time of the year. Plus 33 to simulate the warmest time of the year. We insulate the walls to accommodate that. We design the energy systems to accommodate that. And the code says this, watch out for solar EMFs. Even though they don't go through walls and roofs, they don't do those things, you gotta watch out because, you know, you can't leave your friends staked up in the lawn during a hot summer day, they'll burn. You know, we gotta be careful with this. So what we do with buildings is this, we're very careful. We're supposed to be using lighter, not absorbent exteriors in the finish of buildings. They actually have a function. So even the first time I looked at a building, it was really dark, like this, and I thought, oh my goodness. And then I saw the temperature extremes, I just said, holy mackerel. I said, we're not designing for that. Because imagine this, here's this plus 33, here's how much energy it's using. In Kelowna, we documented as high as 94. And you can imagine this, 94 means the building's been heated up on the outside, it's transferring inside the building. And I'm going to show you this. Here's an area here in Kelowna. Designed for a maximum of 33 or 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And I did this for the Americans. See this roof right here? It's 198. See this right here, this whole area? This is 107 in the shade. Here are the shaded trees here. Look at this, 90.4. And again, we did this for the city of Kelowna and others to show tradesmen, to show builders, to show everybody so we can just get the job done at the end of the day. We're not there to blame people. When you buy a building, you're investing in that. You want it to be what it is. That's your investment. Now here again, and imagine this. In 2004, I was actually invited, an expert-only, local experts, invitation-only sustainable building pilot project. I'm Walter Gray invited. There's a gentleman in the back here too who's been part of this named Pat. You know, we worked on these things a long time ago trying to help the city with these issues, and guess what? Imagine we're invited to that committee to be part of that. We intimidated the city hall and those weaklings, and I get to say that, weaklings, so much that they stopped inviting me. I didn't go to, I said, why aren't you inviting me to this? Here was Wes Kootenai, Fortis, told him, don't invite that guy. Instead of them understanding, we're showing you how you're using energy and how you can save it. These guys got together, instead of understanding we're trying to compliment them, giving them sight, they somehow felt threatened and said, listen, he's competing with us, he's going to affect our business. When the answer is, no.
Cost them money.
Well, the thing is with these guys, if they understood, we would have made them money. But because these guys are engineers talking over their heads, they're not the boots on the ground doing the work. You know, these guys got together and did that. They never should have done it because, man, imagine this. We started working on these meter issues 11 years ago.
And they still got fucked.
Well, imagine this, because these guys just stopped inviting us. As a matter of fact, you can imagine this. As we progressed with this and showed the city groundwater, they ignored it. Showed it to the premier. They wouldn't even pass it on to the hydrologist. When we showed them inflammation can be seen, guess what? Do you think they passed it on to medical professionals here? I actually had American doctors say, did you ever think you'd be fighting your own country from the stateside to come in here and bring this through here? And he said, no. All we're trying to do is give them sight. You know, that's it. We're not doing a thing where, hey, you can imagine as tradespeople. I actually had guys say this to me, you can see that guy's cancer. And I said, yes. They said, do you know how much money he's got? And I said, oh, tell me what we're going to do. And they said, he would pay you a lot of money for that. And I said, you step a little bit closer because I got something special for you. We don't do that. We don't sell out. We don't say, hey, we can see a problem, let's exploit it. Okay? Absolutely. Now here again is the centered issue with this. Here's that air conditioning laying on the floor when it comes through the building. The outside has got two different colors on it. Air conditioning is refrigeration, using thousands of watts per hour, reacting to the symptoms of the exterior being radiated. Here's shade effect, and this shocked the heck out of me. See what shade does right here? This is right after sunrise. Cooling the building down. So here's for landscapers. Functional landscaping can help address this. Now we get into the wireless issue, and here's birds on an invisible wire. But here's the reality of this. There are very particular reasons we don't do this. We're very careful with this. So here are the birds saying, hey, it is a bit freaky with this wireless technology, because guess what you've done? You've got to be very careful with wireless because you are effectively replacing wires. That's why when you do the remote control for the television and somebody says, hey, get out of the way, it's not going through you. When you're talking about EMFs like this, and here's what's important, 2004, or pardon me, 2010, they came to us and said, Curtis, look what they're doing with this Wi-Fi in school. And I said, what the heck is Wi-Fi? And they said, oh, they're using this for the laptops in schools. I said, you can't do that. I said, you put them in an electrical circuit. I said, you can't do that. So here's this. Here, imagine this. How many of you guys order this to bed? How many? Here's what a telecommunications guy is using to work on wireless. So that's the dangers of it, because this stuff is dangerous. It goes through you, all the above. Now here's the code related to this, because when they asked us to look at this, they said, what do you want to do? And I said, you have to have a code. You have to have an exposure code. Here's safety code 6. This is what the Canadian government uses. Now here's something we don't do in industry. We don't have a code that says, we don't know what's causing this. And we don't know biological plausibility, but we'll go forward anyways with this. This is what this code did. They admitted they're missing causality. And here's why. You'll see this right away. Causality means, how are those EMFs hitting people? How can that possibly happen? Because imagine the exposure code says this, don't stimulate tissue except in a medical imaging environment. You're protected, they're doing an x-ray if they have to, that's it. Don't stimulate tissue because it leads to it can cause nerve and muscle depolarization, which means triggering nerves. How many people use that clicker on their car to open a door? That's an EMF trigger. So when I use that for doctors, they said, Curtis, they're talking about an EMF trigger. And I said, imagine triggering your nerves. If you do that with your kids, it might be great. Boom, 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 go to sleep. Now here's this, and we show this because we're going to talk about pacemakers too, because this was a very big issue for this. How many people know what this is? This is called the Sam Phantom model. This is what they're using, and this is what Fortis is relying on and using to say that these frequencies aren't hurting you. This is, believe it or not, this is this. This is a Sam Phantom model. This is what cell phone manufacturers have to do. This is a plastic head with a hole in the top, and they put salt water in it. Here's the phone. Manufacturers have to do that. Put your phone that far away. So when I called Radiation Canada, and they said, Health Canada, they said, okay, how many antennas were talking to that? What was their angle, orientation to the fields? We left out the antennas. I said, what did you do with Wi-Fi? Curtis, we didn't include the routers. This is done in a sterile environment. I said, you left out the gun in a shooting. You left out the train in a train wreck. Imagine having an unplugged toaster and saying this thing's hurting you. It's an electrical circuit, you have to be careful. Now here's an example of what Fortis BC and BC Hydro left out. And this isn't me talking, this is BC Hydro's diagram. Well, hold on, first I'll show you this. Here's the plastic head, right here. And then when they say, Curtis, they can't tell cell phone radiation or see non-thermal effects. Of course you can. Here's a young man on the phone for an hour. Here's before. Here's after an hour in a cell phone. They just thought it was affecting a localized area of his head. And you imagine this. Here are these EMFs with this information going through your body. Oh, I'm talking. It goes back the other way, and you're inside the circuit. And you got to be careful with that. And again, they said, Curtis, there's no a sign showing it causes adverse health effects. And I said, your plastic head doesn't have any health. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have anything. It's ridiculous. Here's BC Hydro's diagram. You see that grid? Here's BC Hydro showing, oh, look at this. Here's a wireless circuit, and we're going to radiate the entire neighborhood. That's what they're going to do. And guess what? You can't do that with highly penetrating EMFs because they go through you. Now, when they go through you, you've got an electrical mechanism that is just horrific because guess what pacemakers in Kamloops, a retired electrician welder came up to me and he said, I have a pacemaker. He said, what is it going to do to me? I said, what do your manufacturer specs say? So you guys imagine this. Our interior health puts in those pacemakers. As taxpayers, we pay for it. And you know what the pacemaker's manufacturer specs say? Stay out of an electromagnetic field. Oops. They tell you to stay out of an electromagnetic field. Well, guess what? Fortis BC is putting something on you that is going to, guess what? It's going to radiate your home. They're taking the EMFs to your home. Oh, it's just hibernating again. Darn thing.
So sleepy.
That's me again. Hold on, I'll get that set up again. Ross, can you hold on? But you can imagine this again. I'll turn this on. Yeah. Again with this. How many people have a pacemaker? How many people have a medical device of any particular kind? Imagine this for me to represent to you. They're going to trigger your pacemaker and kill you at home. There's actually things where, guess what? People have gone to the hospital because their pacemaker has been triggered. It's set off a 911 response because you're not supposed to be in an electromagnetic field. So they're talking here, 3,500 pacemakers and cardiologists saying, what is this going to do? You're going to kill 3,500 people. You're older, you're more vulnerable. You're younger, you're more vulnerable. If you've got a child that's got some health problems, guess what? This is going to take them out. You can't kill people and install that garbage. And these guys, that's the important part of this. These guys got together. Now you're going to go and you're going to get a hold of this information they got here because what you're going to see is you're going to see transcripts from the BC Utilities Commission oral hearing in Kelowna. I cross-examined utilities experts for 3.5 hours. And I went there with one intent. I said, they're going to technically beat the crap out of me. I said, or I'm going to pin him down on this. And here's the important part. How many people have seen media where they said, hey, these are safe? Ross Anderson, here's a doctor down here that just did an article in the paper, and guess what? They're ignoring doctors on this. Well, even an insurer said to me, Curtis, 2 doctors disputed what you said in that hearing in the summary. And I said, 2 doctors with PhDs that aren't qualified in any opinion. A PhD means you did a theory on something, and then you had to represent it. So you're going to see what these guys have got to offer you, and here are the transcripts, line by line, and you're going to see this. I pinned them down on this, and I say, what's the voltage of a cell? -7 millivolts. How many frequencies in a brain? Lots. They go into this and I said, where are they in your risk assessment? They're not there. We left them out. I talked to the electrical engineer. Fortis's Mark Warren says, Curtis, what you do is a hypothesis. The electrical engineer confirmed these oscillations inside buildings. Here are the frequencies of the 1 meter, the 1 antenna in your meter, 900 megahertz. That's where they're going to... Is this off again? I lost it again? Yeah. There you go. There you go. Yep. A little more duct tape. That's what I use. Electrical tape. But you can imagine this. I say to the engineers, tell me the frequencies associated with the meters. He said, there's 2 antennas inside your meter, separate of installation. Now imagine this. One is 900 megahertz. That's 900 million cycles per second. And what that means electrically is this. Going through your building and going through your body, the electromagnetic fields will expand and collapse 1.8 billion times per measurable second. It's inducing currents into you. Imagine this. They actually say, yes, we're inducing currents into you, but not enough to heat your water molecules. Inducing currents into somebody means electrocution, not just hypersensitivity. Mark Warren, these guys say, we object to you saying we're going to hurt people, we're going to do this over this area. I said, you're 10 feet from the meter, you're safe. He says, 20 centimeters away from the meter, you're safe. And then they say this, yes, we admit we're going to cover 17,000 square kilometers with those frequencies. And to put everything in 17,000 square kilometers in the circuit, birds, bees, bugs, cars, trucks, buildings, crops, everything, which will kill everything. You cannot do that. And what these guys did is this. When we found this out at the beginning, what we did is this. We contacted our government and we said, you're the authority having jurisdiction. What did you do? No response. Rich Coleman, the minister, no response. Rich Coleman was also on the beach at Gyro Beach with Gordon Campbell that day too. So here again, here's our government, no response. Energy minister, no response. Gordon Campbell, this guy's no response. City of Kelowna, no response. It was during the Fortis application that we found out. BC, the BC government, the legislature, entrusted BC Hydro to bypass all regulatory processes experts and mass install a grid and meters. So that means this, didn't go to tradespeople, didn't go to academia, didn't go to anybody, didn't go to insurers, didn't go to engineers, didn't consult anybody. They just bypassed everything. And you can't do that because here's the reality. When that Fortis boy came to the door, and you guys imagine this, when I had to intervene in this, as soon as he was coming up the sidewalk, I said, where are your credentials? And he said, I don't have any. Now you saw that connection problem there? I said, there's 8 connections inside that meter base. What did you do with those connections? We're told not to touch them. We're not supposed to touch the meter base without understanding this. The meter base belongs to you. They own the meter. In order to work on the meter, here's what they would do with us electrically. You would have us there, or your electrician there representing this. We would shut everything off for all reasons in the world, make sure everything's shut down. And then we'd say, pull that meter and pull it carefully because, remember when I talked about connections being maintained yearly? Your connections in your meter base have never been maintained in decades, depending on how old your home is. So you've got very fragile components in there. And to see videos where these fools are hammering on your meter because it's kind of well in place. So I've actually seen video where these guys are hitting this thing, trying to get off there. And guess what electricians would be doing? We'd be hiding because you're going to have problems. When they pull the meter under load, and everybody better take this seriously because here's a reality. You live in a home, they're doing this, you've got connection problems, you've got a potential fire there. You've got arcing going on, you've got electrical surges, which are pushing high voltages inside your building. Electronics are frying. Appliances are frying. You know what BC Hydro is doing? They're blaming it on electricians and the old wiring. Okay, they can't do that. That's what these guys have did with this without exception. And here's the important part with the connection issues. You know, there was a death in the coast in a smart meter fire. Texas, deaths. Nevada, deaths. The Texas PUC is investigating. People died. And you imagine this down there with people with a little bit of background. You don't take anything electrically that's plugged into a wall or anything else and just pull it unplugged because you're going to have an arc like you can't imagine. So you imagine this down in Texas or in Nevada. When I said to the fire guys, I said, you imagine your air conditioning load coming on of 6,000 watts or something. You turn that thing on and you got a big spark going across there. It's the meter base that's causing the meter. There is no meter in the world that can withstand that garbage installation. There are no circumstances that we will allow pizza delivery boys and whatever else to swap those meters under load. And even when Fortis came back with an electrician to do the neighbor's place next door, I went over there and he said, Curtis, I'm a red seal. And I said, and shame on you.
Where would you allow that guy to touch that meter with no qualifications or pull it under load? Nobody would do that. You're going to cause problems. And if I did that, guess what? We don't do that even in buildings because you're going to fry people's computer systems. Imagine saying to the people here and doctors, even interior health, what's the information worth in your computers? What are your computers worth? And imagine this, when can the fire happen? Anytime. Anytime. We don't know what your electrical load is. It is dangerous. Fortis has admitted this. We've installed 22,000 meters. You have 22,000 compromised buildings without exception. Realtors have been told, guess what? You can't sell them. What are you going to do? Put a disclaimer on there? You make me burn down? We had a pizza delivery for you, install your meter for you under load? You can't do that. So then we report that to this. Pardon me? Okay.
Oh, listen, you know, this thing's having an electrical problem, how's that? But again, imagine this. When we contact the city in our capacity and say, listen, you can't do this. What the city is supposed to do is they're supposed to dig in and investigate. And I don't know why these guys have done this, but I think the local papers kind of said that, where lobbyists put some of those council people in there. Imagine to respond to that 24-story hotel downtown. Guess what? You're not going to be able to do it. The building's not designed for that. You're going to have to redesign every building. Imagine what this is going to do to your buildings. How many people have worked hard for your investments? Guess what? Your building is not going to comply with building code. And the rule is 4.1.3.6 called vibration. We design buildings for what they're going to be subjected to, whether it's 100 kids bouncing on the floor with aerobics, it doesn't matter what it is. They do this, and then the trades and everybody, we do our job to get that done. There is no margin of error with this, and here's the sad part. Fortis is negligent. They're reckless. They're going to be liable. They're going to be sued to extinction. Here's an example of this when they say no. You get 22,000 compromised buildings. So I'm on the phone with the chief financial officer a couple of days ago, and he said, what are the buildings worth? And I said, you pick a figure. He said, what if they're worth $300,000 a piece? I said, what's 22,000 times 300,000? He said, that's over $6 trillion. I said, do you think insurers are going to pay that out? It's not going to happen. Insurers don't work like that. Under no circumstances we do this. Now, you guys here, again, listen, I'm not here for any other reason in the world, but you can imagine this. We don't tell mechanics what to do. We don't do whatever. This is so catastrophically dangerous. That's why I put that header on there, and I am accountable for what I say. Fortis BC wants to go to court, I'll race them there. I want them to take the plastic head in there and a pizza delivery boy, and we'll meet the judge with the court rules and everything else. It's going to be that. You guys, here's a reality for me. It embarrasses me. I've actually done interviews, and listen, we're tough guys in the construction industry, and I got a little emotional. One, guess what? We're supposed to protect you. You guys have done your job. The seniors have done their jobs. You guys have made this what it is. We've developed these codes from our forefathers, our mistakes and everything else. These weaklings that we know that's been going on for a long time, and again, some people are going to get offended. Get over it. You do your darn job or move along. But here's the reality of this. When they said, Curtis, the mayor, I said, if I kill my apprentice, am I responsible? If I burn the house down, am I responsible? Guess what? Here's a sad reality. Our mayor's not doing his job. He's recklessly endangering people. I'm sad to represent that, but guess what? You can't do that. Whoever in city council isn't doing their job, you know where I'm here right now? Covering my butt. Because people said, you got ready to go there, why don't you not go? And I said, oh, goody. Why don't I hop on the reckless endangerment train and do that too? Not gonna happen. Under no circumstances do tradesmen or anybody working in those industries, we do everything. It's about this, protecting your lives, protecting your investment. We do this to work together, so at the end of the day, when they ask us to inspect buildings, we do this. Is this building passing inspection? Yes. Oh, now you get a mortgage. Now you get insurance. Lenders want to be protected. They want their investment protected. Do you know what insurers are doing now? When we said pizza delivery boys are doing that, they said, no way. Do you know, we talked to construction companies here and said,
Do you know what they're doing to you and your properties and your buildings? Imagine some of these guys here. I've worked for Kelowna Construction. I've worked locally. These guys have worked hard, and guess what to say to them? Your investments are no longer applicable. Imagine consulting on a high-rise here and saying to the engineer, the structural engineer, I said, you're going to have a meter bank here with all of these meters through here. And I said, you're going to have violent oscillations. You're inducing currents. We're down on the East Coast, especially guys in the construction business. Imagine the engineer said, Curtis, the rebar was gone. Imagine a concrete pour with no rebar. Boy, you're in a lot of trouble. Imagine engineers are insured for errors or omissions, but they didn't tell them we're going to cause accelerated corrosion at bridge. The only thing designed for these radio frequencies is an MRI chamber. And it's shameful for me, it makes me sad. I've been called by doctors saying, my husband's taking me to court because he thinks I'm crazy. I tell him I'm sensitive to these frequencies, and he said, you've lost it. And I said, you're not hypersensitive. I said, you're being electrocuted. You can put it any way you want. You're being electrocuted. They're inducing currents into you. They're inducing currents into your children. And again, when the sheriff's office and the U.S. Marshals called, I said, what are you going to do in a situation like that? And you know this. What would you do if somebody was harming your children? Boy, oh boy. And imagine this for real. You go to court and you say, I chopped down the neighbor's tree, they're hanging over my property line. You know what the judge says? You own your property from heaven to hell. You own that. And I use this as an analogy. Grandma next door is bugging me, I don't let those seniors having a picnic, but of course I'm just joking. I said, so I reach across the fence and I tase her. And then the next senior comes up, I tase her too. And then the police come, I tase them, I tase them. And the police said, Curtis, you can't do that. We would respond with lethal force. They're blasting frequencies across your property line and assaulting you, your building. And guess what? I've got a bigger job to protect the mayor from himself, from politicians from himself. Ron Cannon's a good man. Guess what? Our voice in Ottawa isn't doing his job. You know what Norm Letnick said to me? And again, we don't pick on people. It is what it is. Norm Letnick said this to me. Who recognizes what you do? And I said, Norm, you have electricity? You recognize Canadian electrical code? I said, you recognize the BC building code? Like, what is this? But here's the problem. These guys, and again, guess what we don't do in construction? If you had a lobbyist in construction, you know what we do? We'd get him close to a concrete pouring, just kick his butt in there, and then cover him over. If somebody came up to me and said, Curtis, here's what we want you to do. Listen, I would give him a 2-second head start before I beat him up. And then we'd take turns beating him up and dragging him out there to get arrested. You can't do it.
Are you ready for questions?
Okay, listen, you guys have seen enough. Now, here's the important part with this. These guys here, Kelowna Safe Meters, they've got these links for you to see this. Now, what I want you to see in here that you can't see in here, their document will show you a meter base. They will show you the wires coming in. They will show you the stab connections. They will show you what they didn't do. Okay? So that's the most important part. There is no margin of error. You need to take a look at those documents, and the most important part is we don't have disclaimers on them. It is what it is. Okay, so now we want to take any questions. I don't care what they are, how tough they are, or there's no such thing as a dumb question. Okay?